Hi, everyone. We'll just give a few minutes for people to join. Oh my gosh, I think one of the things I like about community ed is that it's on a Friday. The weekend is tomorrow. So good. We're going to do all kinds of fall activities now that we're closing in on fall. What are you going to do this weekend, Caitlin?
I have a very busy but fun-filled weekend. I have a friend getting married in Hood River tomorrow, so heading out that way, and then heading to Medford for our walk on Sunday. So I'll be all over the state of Oregon, but
Yes,
it'd be
excellent.
great. How about you, Joelle and Ken? What do you have going on this weekend?
I'm doing there's a football game at Redmond High School that I'm going to, so that'll be cool.
And I'm going to be here for another 5 or 6 days. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah, visiting with family.
Oh, family. Okay, cool. That's excellent. Is there a region in Germany that you're in right now, or are you all over? Or?
We're in Marburg, which is pretty much right in the middle of Germany. It's about an hour northeast of Frankfurt.
Oh, okay. That's the only place I've been to in Germany is Frankfurt because of the large airport.
Oh, right. Yeah. Marburg is kind of a university town set in the rolling hills and surrounded by farms. Beautiful bike trails everywhere.
Oh, nice.
Really sounds nice. Wonderful, Ken.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. It's a lot like the Willamette Valley, actually, a lot like Eugene.
Yeah. Are we on the same latitude?
No, actually, Marburg, Germany is quite a bit further north. It's about the same. I looked it up once. It might be about the same as Vancouver, BC.
Okay. Well, excellent. Well, okay. It looks like we are about 2 minutes past the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Today, we have a treat for Partners in Care's Community Education Series. We have with us today Ken Scholz from, he's a volunteer for the Alzheimer's Association, and he's a PhD in the field of neuroscience. He lives in Bend, but joins us today from Germany, as we just spoke about. So thank you, Ken. Thank you so much for being here during your travels. We also have Caitlin Berthollet, the Central Oregon Regional Coordinator from the Alzheimer's Association, with us to support our Q&A portion of the presentation, which will come at the end. I am Joelle Blanchard, and I will be your host today. Before we get started, we just have a couple of housekeeping items. So you are all muted and do not have video capability. If you have a comment or question, please use the Q&A feature, and I will also be checking the chat and the comments throughout the program, but we hold all exchanges until the end of the presentation just to keep a good flow. So with that, Ken, I will mute my video and mute my microphone and go ahead and get started.
Great, thanks, Joelle. I'm really excited to be here. Glad to see such a good crowd. You don't often get such large groups of people for these, so I'm excited about that. So this is Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body. It's one of several educational programs sponsored by the Alzheimer's Association. So we will touch somewhat on Alzheimer's disease, but a lot of those more disease-specific questions are covered in other presentations. So I won't go into all those. So some of the questions you might have may be better suited for other presentations related to Alzheimer's disease, but this one is more about healthy living. And so go ahead and get started. The objectives of this, and I have two parts of this that sort of get mixed together. Part of this is a canned presentation that I get from the Alzheimer's Association. Then I've added a bunch of my own content to this. So you're going to see a mix and match of that. These learning objectives came from the Alzheimer's Association, but I've broadened it somewhat. But you're going to see a broad discussion of ways, practical, real world things that you can do to improve the function of your brain as you get older. That's basically the summary of this. And it falls into 4 broad categories: physical health and exercise, diet and nutrition, cognitive activity, and social engagement. And the goal of this is that, so when you come away with, you have an idea, ways of making a plan for yourself as you get older, as we all get older, inevitably, of how to maintain the function of your brain as good as possible as you get older. Okay, unfortunately, everyone's brain function declines to some degree gradually as we get older. That there are a lot of ways of optimizing that, preventing various diseases, various problems that can come up. So we're going to kind of go into all that. So aging and health. The ability to age well in terms of the brain and in terms of brain function is dependent on three broad categories of things. Genes, which you can't really control. You got your genes when you were born, and there's not a lot you can do about that. The environment, and that includes a lot of things. It's not just about air pollution or pollution, but it's also about things like access to healthcare, about access to education, things like that. Some of those factors are things that we can control. Many of those are things we cannot control. Some of them occurred to us when we were young children. We may not have the ability to change that. But this presentation focuses mostly on lifestyle, things that we can potentially change and control for the better to optimize the function of our brain as we get older. Some of those lifestyle choices can keep your body and your brain healthy. So the brain, this is a very general summary of what the brain is. The brain is the control center for your body. It controls just about everything that happens. Your breathing, it doesn't make your heart beat, but it controls how fast your heart beats. Like when you exercise and your heart starts to change the pace, your pulse, that's controlled by your brain. It controls the movement of all your muscles. It controls your knowledge of where your joints and your muscles are in space. It controls your moods, your feelings, your memories, all these things. There are hundreds of billions of nerve cells in the brain, and they each have very unique characteristics that are different from any other cells in the body. And they are interconnected in ways that allow them to communicate very rapidly and very efficiently to perform all these functions, like have conversations, listen to a talk or give a talk. That's all in the brain. Alzheimer's disease and a lot of the other, essentially any form of dementia, eventually leads to damage to the function of those nerve cells and then eventually to the death of nerve cells. So one of the major goals then in preserving your brain function as you get older is to find ways of minimizing that damage or preventing the onset of Alzheimer's disease or any other type of dementia. So I'm going to jump over a little bit now. So that, again, that focused on, sorry about that, I'm moving things around here on my screen. Here we go. That's a little bit specific to Alzheimer's disease, but as the title of this talk mentions, this isn't about only preventing Alzheimer's disease. Really, the goal is to preserve your brain function as you get older and from all potential causes. So yes, Alzheimer's disease is a major cause of dementia and cognitive decline, but it's not the only cause. And there are many other things that we can do to preserve brain health as we get older. And I'm going to go through a lot of those. And so I've sort of categorized it in my three colorful boxes here. These neurodegenerative dementias, which we hear a lot about, is one box of things that can impair brain function. And Alzheimer's disease is one of those types of dementias. There's other types of dementia that share a lot of the same risk factors. So I'm not going to go into them individually or specifically, but a lot of the risk factors are the same. And then a little broader box is other types of things related to cardiovascular function that can affect brain function, like stroke, for example, and just general cardiovascular health and function. And then there are even a bigger box of other causes, and you'll see what I mean by that when we get to it. So focusing on that first box, so let me go back here real quickly. So focusing, I'm going to start with this smaller orange box and then I'll branch out into these bigger boxes. Focusing on Alzheimer's disease. What are the risk factors? So risk factors is a concept that epidemiologists study to try to find out the causes of disease. So by identifying the factors that a large group of people have in common and how those factors influence the onset of disease, they can get some clue to what might be causing that disease. And so a lot of the risk factors for Alzheimer's disease have been identified for many years. And then other studies were done to test, well, if we get rid of that risk factor, does the disease go away? And so a lot of these factors that are listed here are more than just simply associated with the Alzheimer's disease. They've actually been shown to, if you get rid of those factors, it reduces the risk. So they're more than just simple risk factors. So again, we talked about some of these age and family history and genetics. These we can't really change, right? We can't go back in time and we can't change our genetics. So there's not a lot we can do about that. So I'm going to focus on modifiable risk factors, things that we can do to potentially change our risk of Alzheimer's disease, focusing on Alzheimer's disease at the moment. And so just a quick list of those, some of the lifestyle factors that you're going to see these repeatedly: physical inactivity, smoking, education, social and cognitive engagement, poor sleep quality, excessive alcohol use. And then some of these can be grouped together with cardiovascular risk factors: overweight and obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. It's a bit more complicated than just high cholesterol, but there are several different lipid disorders, cholesterol type things that go on that kind of influence the risk of Alzheimer's disease and other kinds of dementia, and poorly controlled diabetes. So this is a lot of things. What should we focus on? What are the most important? How can we make the biggest difference? What's the biggest bang for the buck? So scientists have studied that. There's a study that came out, I think in 2017, the reference is here, or 2014 and 2020. There's another study sort of in the middle that uses some of this. They take these risk factors and they studied, looked at a lot of other studies that had been done in the past and combined them all together with the idea of identifying if we were able to prevent each of these risk factors, how many cases of dementia would we prevent? So this isn't specific to Alzheimer's disease. This is across a lot of different types of dementia. And what they found was that physical inactivity was the greatest, had the greatest effect. So in other words, if we were able to get rid of physical inactivity, in other words, get everyone to exercise an optimal amount, we would be able to prevent 21% of all the cases of the cognitive decline in dementia as people got older. That's a pretty big effect. That's the biggest of all these, but all the other ones are important too. Smoking, if we completely eliminated smoking, we would get rid of 10% of cases of dementia. Other ones listed here: depression, midlife obesity, and midlife hypertension. Notice that they focus on midlife. So it's not just happening because people have hypertension or obesity when they're older. These many of these risk factors are influencing the risk of cognitive function in late life. Their influence happens earlier in life, in midlife, and probably even in teenage years or early adulthood. So I'm going to come back to some of that. So let's focus on physical activity a little bit. What does it, if we're say 60 years old and physically inactive and not very fit, is it worth the effort? Is it going to make any difference at this point in life to try to get more physical activity and get more fitness? Well, someone actually asked that question and did a big study in, I think, Denmark, in one of the Scandinavian countries. And this is what they did. They took 30,000 people and they followed them for 20 years. And at the very beginning, they separated that large group of people into those that were the least fit, the lowest fitness level, the 20% of people with the lowest fitness level. And then the other group was the 80% of people that were more fit than that, what they call the most fit level. There's obviously a wide range within that 80%. And then they followed them for 10 years and then reassessed their fitness. Did some of them, whether some of them got better, improved their fitness, or got less fit. And then they continued to follow them for an average of at least 20 years to look at who developed Alzheimer's disease or dementia, other kinds of dementia or cognitive decline where they couldn't function in daily life. And so this first group of people that started in the lowest group of fitness, and 10 years later, we're still in that lowest 20% of fitness. That's what they call that the baseline. They had a certain level, or the reference. They had a certain rate of development of dementia, and everyone else we're going to compare to that. So then what happens if in that other group, the most fit 80% at the beginning, and the people 10 years later were still in that relatively higher fitness, the most fit 80% group? Those people had 40% lower risk of dementia later in life as they got older. So let me go back and mention that these 30,000 people they were following, they were started out, I believe they started out, they were at least 45 years old, and none of them had dementia at the beginning. So these are not young adults. These are, middle-aged and older adults. So then what happens if someone starts out in into that most fit 80% group, but their fitness declines as they get older and they end up in that least fit group? Well, they still had a little bit lower risk of dementia relative to these people that were always in the lowest fitness group, but not very much. They lost a lot of that protective effect of having good physical fitness. They got some benefit from having been fit at that early stage, but they lost a lot of that as their physical fitness declined. And then most importantly, people who started in the least fit group, this D group, and then during that 10 years improved their fitness and moved into the more fit group, they had a 48% lower risk of dementia than the people who were stayed in the least fit group. So improving their fitness, these are people, again, in their late middle ages, early, older people, improving their fitness cut their risk of dementia by about half. And that's a pretty major effect. This is a very powerful, convincing study. There are many, many other studies that have just looked at how physical fitness influences risk of dementia, and the results all support this idea. This is by far the strongest, best evidence, but many other studies would support or consistent with this idea. Okay. Oops. Okay, so this is kind of summarizing this sector, the physical health and exercise sector of this pie of 4 different major groups of things to do to maintain our cognitive function as we get older. Cardiovascular activity, pretty good, solid evidence now that it can reduce your risk of cognitive decline. Regular and vigorous physical exercise leads to increased blood flow in the brain, but it does a lot of other things. There are a lot of hormones and a lot of molecules in the brain that you've probably never heard of that are secreted when we exercise that actually preserve the survival of brain cells. Kind of surprising. So there's a lot of good basic science evidence that can explain why physical activity improves brain function. Okay, let me jump a little bit here. So what can we do? Often it's difficult to start getting physical exercise if you're not used to it. Sometimes it seems overwhelming, or if you haven't done it in a long time. So how do you get started, and how do you maintain that habit? It turns out that there are a lot of other types of researchers sort of in the psychology domain that have studied this question. How do you get people to change their habits, basically? And this list on this current slide is a summary of a lot of the best findings from those psychology studies of how to change your behavior and get involved in something like a regular physical fitness routine. Number one, do something you like. Okay, if you enjoy it, you're going to more likely to do it. Start out small. And let me elaborate on that. What do you mean by that? Some people, I often get the question, how much physical activity do I need to do? Well, there's no single answer. It differs for each person. But if it's very important to start out, be realistic with yourself and start out where you are right now. And just gradually increase your activity level from that. If the most physical activity you get is going out to the mailbox every day, well, maybe start walking back and forth 2 or 3 times, and then walk around the block. One of my favorite examples is a woman my wife met at Pilot Butte State Park in Bend. If you're familiar with Bend, it's a hill and a state park in Bend that has trails that go up to the top. I think it's about 800 feet, something like that. So she met this woman one day that was walking up and down Pilot Butte, and the woman started talking with her and told her that she had started about 2 years earlier, and she was only, the first time she came 2 years earlier, she was only able to walk about 100 feet. And but she did that, but she kept doing it every day. Came back the next day and did it again. And as she felt a little more capable and a little stronger, she would push herself gently, just a little bit, to do a little more. And during the course of those 2 years, she went from doing only able to walk about 100 feet to being able to go up and down Pilot Butte 3 times, which is quite an accomplishment. And she had lost 150 pounds in that time, and greatly improved every measure of her cardiovascular fitness, and probably greatly reduced her risk of cognitive decline as she got older. So that's an example. She started small. She started where she was. She gradually pushed herself over a course of time to great improvement. And she really enjoyed it. So she kept doing it. She did it safely. She got her heart rate up. And one of these most important ways of convincing yourself to maintain a routine like that is to get someone to do it with you, a friend who enjoys it. So it becomes less of an exercise routine and more of a social engagement that you do every day or 3 times a week or whatever. And then you also kind of end up being accountable to each other. It's an important aspect of maintaining that habit. And of course, you should always check with your doctor. Many people have certain health issues that they need to be aware of, be careful of, things like heart rhythm disorders, or if you're on a specific drug that can make you drowsy or change your blood pressure, things like that. You need to be careful about things like that. Okay, let me switch gears again. Okay, so we talked about physical inactivity, and that's the biggest effect. But as I mentioned already, there's a lot of other things that can reduce your risk of dementia as you get older. Smoking, stop smoking. And some people have the same question. Well, if I've been smoking for 40 years, does it do any good to stop now? And yes, there are studies that show that lung function improves, risk of cancer goes down, risk of heart disease goes down after you stop smoking, even if you've been doing it for a long time. And many of these are things that you need to work with your doctor to improve, like getting diabetes under control or preventing it altogether is much better. But reducing, controlling high blood pressure, obesity, and well, education status may not be something that you can control. It may have happened, may not have gotten exposed to good educational environment as a young child, but depression, oddly, depression is a psychological condition. It seems to be a risk factor for dementia, and vice versa. Having dementia is a risk factor for depression. We don't really understand exactly how that happens, but it seems that treating depression can reduce the risk of development of dementia. So that's, again, worth working with your doctor and getting that under control if that's an issue. Okay, so the American Heart Association, oddly enough, has put together what they call their Life Simple 7. So this is a lot, sometimes this is a lot of things to keep in mind, all this stuff, but they've made this simple list of Life Simple 7 things to do for better brain function as you in later life. And this is a very helpful thing. And this is repeating much of the same list that we just talked about. Be a non-smoker, get physical activity at whatever goal level is appropriate for you and gently progress in that. Have a good healthy body mass index, a healthy diet. We're going to go into that a little more. Keep your blood pressure under control, cholesterol levels under control, and fasting blood glucose, which is related to diabetes. So if fasting blood glucose is greater than 100, it's a sign of what they call pre-diabetes. And then if it increases more above 126, I think, milligrams per deciliter, that's a diagnostic criteria for diabetes itself. So what difference, why does the American Heart Association care about this, and what difference does it make? They've done studies to show that when in people who have more of these simple 7 items that are correct, that are on the good side, they have better brain function 25 years later. And this is they're looking at adults, young adults aged 18 to 30. So having these 7 items in the right place between the ages of 18 to 30 years is associated with having better brain function 25 years later. Okay, so whenever I've done these talks, I don't think I've ever had anyone who was in that age range, 18 to 30 years. I think it's unfortunate. It would be nice to get this message out. So tell your children and tell your grandchildren to that this is, their lifestyle now and their health now is going to affect their brain function as they get older, 25 years later. It's a big effect. And the opposite is true too. Having more of these out of the good range is associated with worse cognition 25 years later. Okay. Okay, so this is kind of the same list that we were just looking at. Okay. Work with your doctor to maintain these things. Okay, so let's move on to another segment of this pie, diet and nutrition. What do we know? Diet affects brain function in many of the same ways, and diet during early adulthood, middle age will affect brain function later, much in the same way. There are many dietary guidelines, and following the ones that are shown, there's something called the DASH diet. That is, I think it's called dietary something to prevent hypertension. And it's one of the most studied, scientifically studied diets. It's a little bit difficult to follow, but it gives you the concepts there. It's, kind of a Mediterranean diet thing, lots of fruits and vegetables, healthy oils, those kinds of
Foods
things.
that have been shown to lead to healthy aging would be fruits and vegetables, and in particular green leafy vegetables and berries, as well as limited intake of high-fat food items that you get through high-fat dairy and cheese and red meats, and also healthy vegetable oils. So this would be, olive oil would be a good example, have been shown to reduce your risk of heart disease as well as dementia.
Okay, so you gave a lot of good advice there. I have a little bit of concern that some people come away from that thinking they should only eat berries and spinach. Those things, there's studies that have shown that berries are healthful and have antioxidants and maybe that, but I would take more of a general approach to that, and that's listed, kind of shown on this slide. Lots of fruits and vegetables, maybe moderate the fruits sometimes because they can have a lot of sugar. So keep the sugary fruits under control, not excessively. Nuts, beans, and whole grains, lean meats, fish, and poultry. So lean meats rather than saturated trans fats. Avoid processed foods. Hard to know exactly what that means, but sugar, I think sugar is a major problem that a lot of people have not come to grips with. Let's put it that way. It sort of underlies a lot of the type 2 diabetes, a lot of problems with liver function as we get older can be traced back to consumption of sugar and fats. And that will, as I'm going to talk a little bit later, that affects your brain function as well. So I think you probably have seen a lot of this before in presentations or information from the American Heart Association, or just general news about how to stay healthy. Okay. What can you do? So diet and nutrition can be rather tricky. If you're a member of Costco, for example, I get their catalog and it's whatever, 50 pages long, and about 30 of those pages are advertisements for dietary supplements. The vast majority of those have not been proven to do anything in particular. So be very skeptical about advertisements, especially if they're promoting things like improves memory or boosts immune function, which isn't even a recognized scientific concept. Talk to a reputable source. A registered dietitian is a good example. Not everyone has access to that, but a well knowledgeable physician, clinician who's a specialist or knows what they're talking about in these things. In terms of dietary supplements to prevent cognitive decline or prevent Alzheimer's disease specifically, there's nothing that's been shown to do anything in particular. And in fact, a lot of things that are sold as dietary supplements can be dangerous because they're not regulated. Their manufacturing is not regulated or monitored very carefully at all. And many of them have been found in independent testing to, number one, not contain the ingredients that they are advertised to contain, and number two, can sometimes contain dangerous ingredients. And there are many cases of liver failure and even changes in brain function caused by ingredients that should not be included in some of the supplements. So be careful with all that. Work with your doctor. Make sure your doctor knows what you're taking, especially if you're taking any other prescription drugs, because anything else you're taking is going to interact with it. Even if it's a all natural dietary supplement, can affect a lot of things, including your brain function. Okay, the next pie, cognitive activity. Keeping your mind active forms new connections among brain cells, encourages blood flow to the brain, does a lot of things. Remember those hormones that I mentioned with physical activity that promote survival of nerve cells? Using your brain does a lot of the same thing. It causes cells to secrete other hormones that support the survival of your brain cells. So by using your brain, you're preserving your brain. And there's a lot of studies to back that up. So how do you take advantage of that?
One of the most interesting factors is cognitive stimulating activities, which basically for us just means mental processing of information. It can be from a book, it can be from the radio, it can be a magazine, it can be from a lecture, it can actually be from watching TV. All of these things require processing information. And the old adage of, use it or lose it is actually something that turns out, at least from the observational data, to look like it's true. So numerous studies now have shown that being more engaged in cognitively stimulating activities is actually good for maintaining cognition. And it's true in late life, and it's true in early life. And so what we recommend is that you start early, and if you're already late, start now.
Okay, so I want to make a couple comments about that. Number one, you'll see books on sale of mind games and things like that. If you like doing that kind of thing, by all means do it. There's nothing harmful about it. But keep in mind that doing Sudoku puzzles, for example, it was kind of a fad for a while. Some celebrities, I think, were talking about how doing Sudoku puzzles would keep their brain healthy. Well, scientists studied that question, and what they found was that doing Sudoku puzzles keeps your brain good at doing Sudoku puzzles. It doesn't stimulate, it doesn't maintain other brain functions. So you need that complexity in the real world. You need doing all kinds of different activities with your brain to maintain all the different parts of your brain. So your brain, every little piece of your brain follows that use it or lose it principle. And the other thing I want to say that's related to that is that sometimes when inputs to your brain become, what's a good word? Don't work as well, let's say. Okay, so for example, if your hearing declines, very common for people as get older, or not even, it doesn't even have to be age related, our hearing declines. So it's been shown that people whose hearing declines, if they take those people into two groups, one group gets hearing aids to restore as much of their hearing function as possible. The other group just lives with that hearing decline. The group that got hearing aids has dramatically less chance of having dementia or any kind of cognitive decline later on. So that getting those hearing aids in the hearing impaired people prevents many of the cases of Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So it's maintaining that sensory input that maintains not only your hearing function, but it also helps you maintain social interactions with people. People who lose their hearing aid tend to withdraw from conversations. And so it builds up in this domino effect where there's one impairment leads to another impairment, and it just builds. And all those things are affecting so many different aspects of the way your brain functions that it leads to an overall decline in brain function. So that not only applies to hearing aids, but it applies to vision, getting cataract treatment, or just getting better glasses or contacts, whatever you need. All those sensory inputs are important for maintaining your brain function and for maintaining all the activities that help you maintain your brain function. So these are some of the activities. So ways of getting cognitive activity: read books and articles that challenge and inspire you, complete puzzles and play games. Okay, yeah, as I mentioned, those are only going to be specific to those activities. Do lots of different things, new skills and new hobbies, engage in ongoing learning. And beyond all those things, have conversations with people. Having a conversation is one of the most profound ways of using your mind. I think one of the things he mentioned in that video is, even if you like to watch TV, watch TV. It's stimulating your brain. Well, it is to some degree, but watching a TV show and then talking about that TV show with a friend discussing how, other examples of similar scenarios or things that reminded you of, or, ethical questions that were brought up, those kinds of things is a vastly more profound way to stimulate your brain than just passively absorbing what the TV throws at you, okay? And then the last sector of the pie is social engagement. That kind of relates to what I was just talking about, having those conversations, and as well as the hearing aid issue, maintaining your ability to have social engagement by getting hearing aids or whatever you need in order to do that, living in an environment and being open, having friends that you like to talk with. There are many studies showing that people who are more socially engaged have better outcomes, a better preservation of brain function as they get older versus people who are more isolated. So there's just practical suggestions on what to do to fill in that sector of the pie. Visit with friends and family, and engage with other people. So I'm going to repeat it again. Keep your sensory capacity there, maintain your hearing function, your sight, all those inputs that your brain uses to do social engagement. Keep those good, because there's ways of doing that now. Stay involved in the community if you can. Volunteer. So these are just ways of getting you involved with other people. All those different, just reading someone's visual cues, reading someone's body language. These are profound ways of using your brain. It's stimulating emotional connections. It's stimulating cognitive connections that use all these different complex parts of your brain, and using your brain is going to help maintain your brain. Okay, so I talked about, let me jump back into something. Do you remember this when I talked about this study showing that people who improved their fitness lowered the risk of dementia? Okay, so, and one of the points that I made with that was that it's never too late to start. These were people who were already in their late adulthood, and older adults. They showed that improving their fitness reduced the risk of dementia, even at that late stage. And I also showed some data in the young adults who had the 7 American Heart Association items, maintaining blood pressure, maintaining a good body weight, keeping physically active, improved their cognitive function 25 years later. So a big general concept that comes from all that is this. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. Oops. It is never too early and never too late in the life course for dementia prevention. So, okay, so it's never too early. We showed that even as young adults and probably even in teens, maintaining a lot of those good cardiovascular parameters improves your function late in life, and it's never too late. Keeping hearing aids functioning, improving your fitness, it's not too late. Stopping smoking, keeping your blood pressure under control, keeping diabetes under control, all those things. So keep that in mind. Okay, let's see. So we talked about many of the big, and I'm going to go back to my my boxes here pretty soon. So there's some other risk factors for dementia beyond those big cardiovascular ones. And I see I'm getting short on time, so I'm going to try to speed up. But I talked about hearing impairment, so I put stars by that. And there's a big giant study out of England where they looked at all the different ways of reducing the risk of brain function decline in older people this time, not in the younger people, in older people. Getting hearing aids was way bigger than everything else they studied. Okay, so it's maintaining that sensory input to the brain that allows your brain to function. It allows you to maintain social interactions. It does so many things. Okay, another one I want to emphasize here is sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is a condition that happens during sleep, and it refers to the stopping. Apnea means stop breathing while you're sleeping, and it's related to snoring. There's a lot of evidence now that when that happens, it reduces brain function. It impairs your sleep, because what happens is the people wake up hundreds of times throughout the night, but they're not really aware that they wake up. They just get almost to the point of being consciously awake, but not quite, so that they can start breathing again. And they get very poor sleep quality, and also impairment of oxygenation of the blood. And this has now been linked with declines in brain function as people get older. And there are ways of detecting this and getting it treated. It's a little, can be tricky and sometimes uncomfortable, but it's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, so now I'm going to go expand out from my dementia box into these bigger boxes. Stroke is another major cause of brain damage, brain function decline as we get older, and has a lot of the same risk factors that we saw with cardiovascular disease. So it's many of the same things, but there are some, in some people, there are very specific causes of stroke, and often can't detect those in advance, but sometimes they can. One of the most common is atrial fibrillation, which is a type of brain heart rhythm abnormality, and it's something that often can't feel. A person is not aware that they have atrial fibrillation, but it changes the way the blood comes out of the heart, and it leaves little pockets of blood in the heart, and those cause clots, and that then gets broken up and sent out into the brain and can cause a stroke. So again, working with your doctor, making sure that they detect and treat atrial fibrillation or any other causes that can lead to strokes. Impairment of the valves in your legs that help to bring your blood back to your heart. That can cause pooling of blood in your legs and also lead to blood clots. Some people have impairments or changes or loss of blood clotting, efficiency in blood clotting, or changes in the way their blood clots, and could lead to clot formation in unpredictable times. And those can be treated oftentimes. So if they're detected and treated, you can really do a lot to reduce the risk of stroke and preserve brain function. Dehydration. This is one that gets overlooked a lot, but this is a surprising statistic. Of all the people who show up in the hospital with a stroke, about 30% to sometimes more than 50% in different studies of those people were dehydrated at the time they showed up at the hospital with their stroke. Does that mean that dehydration causes stroke? We don't actually know that, but it's I would be very concerned about that. In other words, stay hydrated. It's an easy thing to do. There's no risk unless you get carried away. Don't overhydrate too much, but maintain your hydration status. Drink water. Even when it's not leading to a stroke, it's known that even in children and young adults, dehydration impairs brain function and can change a person's mood. In older adults are more susceptible to dehydration and its complication. So stay hydrated. It's okay. There's another condition called hepatic encephalopathy. It's kind of a fancy term, but hepatic refers to the liver. Encephalopathy means something wrong with the brain, basically. So what happens, your liver is essential for reducing, your body produces toxins all the time. And one of those toxins is ammonia. Your liver takes that ammonia, converts it to urea, and then that's secreted in your urine and eliminated from your body. In people with liver diseases or liver failure, the liver struggles and eventually fails to convert that ammonia into urea, and ammonia stays in the body. And it basically is a toxin to your brain. So people with this condition, liver failure, have developed what's called hepatic encephalopathy. The brain doesn't work simply because it's being exposed to ammonia, being exposed to a toxin. So why does the liver fail? What happens? What are the causes of liver failure? There are a number of them. One of the most common that's emerging now is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and it's related to the same lifestyle conditions: eating too much sugar, eating too many fatty foods, things like that. And this can eventually lead to this type of liver failure. Okay, some vitamin deficiencies. I'm going to try to wrap up real quick here. Be aware of vitamin B12 deficiency. Vitamin B12 has to bind to a protein in the stomach in order to be absorbed. And as we get older, some people stop producing that protein. So vitamin B12, even if they take it in their diet or as a supplement, it doesn't get absorbed in their body. And that can cause declines in brain function that can be treated by getting injections of vitamin B12. But if it's not treated promptly, it can lead to irreversible declines in brain function. So keep an eye on that. That's also a fairly common problem among people who eat a vegan diet, because you can only get vitamin B12 from animal sources. Actually, it originally comes from algae, but it comes through animal sources to humans. Traumatic brain injury. This has been in the news a lot. We know that sports, in particular American football, is associated with long-term repeated damage to the brain. And there's a lot of evidence, even in young children as young as 8 years old, that participating in football can lead to detrimental brain changes that might eventually lead to traumatic encephalopathy. So putting it all together, just this, again, going back to the summary, it's never too early and never too late in the life course for dementia prevention. So putting all these pieces together, again, just taking care of health, keep moving, physical activity, eat right, keep your mind active, and stay connected with other people, social engagement.
Recently at the Alzheimer's Association.
I'm going to skip this. Okay. Start today, start small and build. I think we talked about that. Do what you enjoy, make healthy choices, make a plan, get support from others, get a friend to do it with you, have fun. And then I gave some warnings about, supplements and things like that. Be careful about that and be open with your doctor. A lot of people are maybe ashamed or embarrassed to tell their doctor that they're taking a dietary supplement, but don't be. Doctors are pretty open-minded for the most part. They might tell you to stop taking it, but they might have a good reason for that. So that's a good reason to talk to your doctor. Okay, so coming close to wrapping up, one of the people, Caitlin Berthollet, was introduced at the beginning. She's the local chapter coordinator in the Central Oregon for the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association has a lot of amazing resources, and one of the best ones is a helpline. It's an 800 number, but it's very different from other 800 numbers that you see advertised. They have on staff people who can speak as many as 200 different languages, and they can help connect you with social workers, any kind of issue that you have that's even distantly related to dementia or Alzheimer's Association. They can steer you in the right direction, help you get the assistance you need. And they also have a website that has a lot of resources on it. And there's a community resource finder. So I'm going to let Caitlin jump in and give her a little summary of what's available in that regard.
Yeah. So, Ken, if you had, I know we're really short on time, but if you wouldn't mind going back just one slide real quick. Yeah, this community resource finder is a place that you can go to look for all of our programs, upcoming education classes and support groups. But yeah, this, if you go to alz.org, you can get connected. We have the Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body program pre-recorded, as well as these other trainings. So you're welcome to go online, and they're all totally free. If you need a recap of any of this information, that would be a great place to go. Thanks, Ken. And then you can go forward 2 slides. And then again, another online resource, this is all connected. It's a message board. So we have a section for caregivers and family members, friends of those supporting someone living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And then we also have a portion for individuals that are living with dementia themselves. So questions are already posed on there. You can go through those and look through them, or you can post your own questions and get support from that community online. It's like an informal support group in a way. Next slide, please. And Alzheimer's Navigator is an online care planning tool. So this is really great to be able to walk through where you're at right now and knowing for the future what things to have in place and be prepared as somebody's going through their dementia journey. And I apologize, and I'm going over these really quickly, but please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or the helpline if you have additional questions or want more information on any of these. Next slide, please.
Okay. So there are some questions in the Q&A box, and I will go through some of these. Some of them are very broad. I may not be able to do a very adequate job, but one of the questions is, please expand on the potential for the negative impact of supplements. So that's a very broad question because there's probably hundreds of supplements out there, but I talked a bit about the fact that they're really not regulated. And that's one of my major concerns with supplements, is that there are many cases of people basically being poisoned by taking supplements. Maybe not supplements targeting the cognitive function market, but there were supplements targeting bodybuilders, for example, and to help build muscle, and people were ending up having complete liver failure and having to get liver transplants because of contaminants in those supplements. So that's an example of very dangerous situation where supplements. It's hard to answer that specifically without going into one. So another question is B12 measured in a standard blood panel? I don't actually know the answer to that. So ask your doctor that. I don't know the answer to that offhand. I bet you could find out by Googling it. Any evidence that meditation or mindfulness practices help in this area? I probably don't really know the answer to that either. It's, just thinking as a biologist, there's no reason to think that those practices would change many of the biologic pathways that lead to Alzheimer's disease or specific forms of dementia, but they may be helpful in things like depression. If doing mindfulness meditation works for you in terms of eliminating and reducing depression, then that could potentially be helpful in reducing your risk of dementia in the future. I'd have to do a specific study to do a literature search to really answer that question. So okay, and then I see Caitlin is answering the question about the community resource website. Is that?
It looks like it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Caitlin. And again, I will list all of these resources on the follow-up email that you'll receive next week, including a survey and any other resources that Ken would like to share with me to share with our audience today. That would be excellent. Looks like we have 2 more minutes, and I've written down 3 questions, so I think I'll hold off on that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm fascinated by this. I know that the correlation between depression and mental health in general and the overall health of our older community members living in licensed facilities like an assisted living facility or a memory care, they have, I just have anecdotal evidence of really sad situations during the pandemic where we had to be pretty extreme and severe in our responses to keep everyone healthy.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you had any response to that in terms of, when someone, is isolated completely,
Right.
the
It's
impact on the brain.
yeah, it's a really important question. I can't say that I know about the research right off the top of my head. I would guess that there are people who have studied that, and I bet it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, there's,
So-
the data is still coming in. There's still,
Mhm.
COVID is still happening across the globe. And so there are research studies specifically geared at understanding the impact of COVID on, for isolation and people's social engagement, but also the impact on the brain long-term for somebody that has had COVID. So there's lots of things in the work on the research pipeline. And I know we're pretty much out of time today, but the Alzheimer's Association is really proud to be the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's and dementia-related research, and has a lot of really great resources available. So I'll make sure to get those to you, Joelle, for some additional reading that anyone would like to check out. Or again, our helpline is a really great place to reach out to. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one of the ways that we fund that research and all the programs and services that we have is through the Walk to End Alzheimer's. And that's actually coming up here in Central Oregon on October 16th at Riverbend Park. And we invite everyone to join us. I know Partners in Care has started a team and is always leading the way. So we're so excited to have them on board, and hope
And
you
it'd
can
be a
all make it out.
It would be a great way to kick off your new physical activity.
Yes, great way to get
Habit.
that social engagement and physical activity. Marking 2
Yeah.
boxes for your healthy living. So
There you go.
wonderful.
Wow,
Thanks
thank you so much for joining us, and I just can't wait to have you back next time. Thank you,
Thanks
Ken.
for having us. I enjoyed it. My pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Joelle. Thanks, Ken. Thanks everyone for
Thanks,
being
Joelle.
here.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Okay, have a
Take
great
care.
weekend. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.